Wyoming Territory, 1881. The wind cut sharp through the sagebrush hills outside Laramie as the westbound train hissed to a stop, steam curling around the platform like ghostly fingers. From the second-class passenger car, a woman stepped down with a carpetbag clutched tight in her hands, her right cheek turned away from the crowd. Her name was Aurelia Boone, and she'd come 2,000 miles to marry a stranger only to be turned away before her boots touched his doorstep. She stood alone now, her gloved hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her bonnet. A scar, jagged and pale against her otherwise smooth skin, ran from her right ear to just under her jaw. It had once been a burn, now long healed but impossible to forget. The man who'd sent for her, a shopkeeper named Harold, took one look at her face and muttered, "Not what I expected," before closing his door. That had been 4 days ago. Now Aurelia had nowhere to go, no money left, and nowhere to send word. She had sold everything to make this trip her trunk, her sewing machine, her mother's brooch. She had been living at the edge of the stockyard, sleeping beside a freight shed and washing herself with cold water from the horse trough. She did not cry. She had done enough of that on the train. A voice interrupted her thoughts. "You need help?" Aurelia turned her head slowly, instinctively angling her scar away. The man standing before her was tall, his hat pulled low over sun-darkened eyes. His shoulders were broad beneath a worn canvas coat, and there was dust on his boots. A rancher, she guessed. Maybe 30, maybe a little more. He looked like someone who had built his life with his own hands. She swallowed. "No, thank you." He did not move. "You look like you have not eaten in a day or two." Aurelia felt her stomach clench, but she stayed quiet. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said. "Name's Orin McCrae. I run a cattle ranch about 10 miles west of here. I got 2 boys who eat more than they work, and an empty room since my sister married and moved up to Cheyenne. If you need a place to rest for a spell, I can offer that." She stared at him. "Why would you help me?" "Because I saw how that shopkeeper treated you," he said. "And because I got no use for cowards who can't see past a scar." Aurelia looked away. He reached up slowly and took off his hat, running a hand through his short, dark hair. "I know you do not know me, but I got 2 sons who need a woman's steadiness in their lives, and you look like you know how to hold yourself strong. That means something to me." She shook her head. "I came here to marry a man who rejected me without a word. I am not looking to be anyone's burden." Orin's voice was steady. "You would not be." She studied him for a long moment. His eyes were clear, not soft, but honest. Finally, she said, "I'm Aurelia Boone." He nodded once. "Come on then, Miss Boone. Let's get you warm." The ride out to Orin's ranch was quiet. His wagon was old but well kept, the horses steady. Aurelia sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching the land roll by in low hills and open sky. Spring was just waking up in the grasslands, and the snow had melted into the earth, leaving the air damp and sharp with life. They arrived near dusk. The ranch house stood at the edge of a cottonwood grove. It was simple, made of pine boards and stone, with smoke curling from the chimney and a dog barking in the distance. 2 boys ran out as they pulled up. One was maybe 10, the other 7. Both had messy brown hair and dusty boots. "Bram Boone," Orin called to them. "This is Miss Boone. She'll be staying with us for a while." The older boy, Bram, tilted his head. "She got the same name as us." "No relation," Orin said. "Just manners is all." Boone, the younger one, stepped forward. "You are real pretty." Aurelia blinked, unsure if he was teasing her. Orin spoke gently. "Boone." The boy frowned. "I meant it." Aurelia's throat tightened and she forced a smile. "Thank you." Inside, the house smelled like wood smoke and bread. The main room held a hearth, a rough table with 4 chairs, and a worn sofa near the window. Orin showed her to a small room with a bed and a wash basin. "You can stay here as long as you like." "I will earn it," she said. He nodded once. "I believe you." Over the next week, Aurelia found her hands busy and her mind quieter. She cooked in the mornings, helped the boys with their reading in the afternoons, and mended clothes by lantern light. The house began to feel less like a stopover and more like a place she belonged. One morning she was hanging laundry when Orin came out from the barn, his sleeves rolled up and sweat across his brow. He paused near her. "You sew better than anyone I have ever met." Aurelia smiled faintly. "I had to learn young. My father died in the war. Mama kept us afloat with her needle until she got sick." Orin rubbed the back of his neck. "You do not talk much about yourself," she glanced at him. "I learned not everyone wants the whole story." "I do," he said. She met his eyes. "I burned my face when I was 12. Kitchen fire. I tried to pull my little brother out. He died anyway." Orin's jaw tightened. "I am sorry." "I do not need pity." He stepped closer, not touching her, just close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. "I do not pity you. I respect you." She looked away, but not before he saw the shine in her eyes. That night, after the boys were in bed and the house was quiet, Aurelia stood by the window, looking out at the moonlight spilling over the pasture. Orin came to stand beside her. "You are not a burden," he said softly. She turned to him. "You do not have to say that, I know, but I mean it." "I thought I came here to be a wife," she said, "but I ended up just trying to survive." "You are more than someone's bride," he said. "You are the kind of woman a man builds a life around." Aurelia's breath caught. "Why are you saying this?" He reached out then, slow and careful, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His fingers did not flinch at the scar. "Because I see you, Aurelia," he said. "And I am not letting fear make me miss something good." Her heart beat wildly. "I came here to love someone who could not love me back. I do not know if I can try again." "You do not have to try alone." And then, without hesitation, without fear, he kissed her. It was not rushed, not desperate. Just steady, warm, and real. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his chest, her voice barely above a whisper. "I did not expect this." "Neither did I," he said, and wrapped his arms around her like he meant to hold her for the rest of his life. And maybe, just maybe, he would. By the time late spring took hold of the Laramie Plains, the cottonwoods near the river had leafed out in full, and the creek behind the McCrae ranch ran high with meltwater. Aurelia woke most mornings to the sound of birds nesting in the beams above her room, and the smell of damp earth rising through the floorboards. She had learned the creak of the back door, the way the house settled deeper into its bones when the wind picked up, the scrape of Orin's boots at the porch step just before dusk. One afternoon, she stood behind the house, elbows deep in a bucket of soap and water, scrubbing the boys' work shirts. Boone was sitting cross-legged in the dust nearby, carving something into a scrap of pine with his penknife. "You ever make pie?" he asked without looking up. "Plenty of times," Aurelia said, wringing out a sleeve. "What kind are you hoping for? Raspberry?" She paused. "That's a summer fruit," he shrugged. "Just asking." She set the shirt on the line, clothespins clacking. "If I find some, I'll bake it." Bram came around the corner, a splinter in his palm and his mouth set stubborn. "I ain't letting Pa pull it again." "Last time he dug half my hand out." Boone didn't look up. "He says you squawk louder than the chickens." "I do not." "You do." Aurelia wiped her hands and crouched beside Bram. "Let me see." He held it out, barely breathing. She examined it, then took a sliver of clean cloth from her apron pocket and used her sewing needle to ease the wood free. Bram winced but didn't cry out. "There," she said gently. "Done." He looked at her hand, still steady on his, and whispered, "You don't even flinch." "I've had practice." He nodded like he understood something he hadn't before, then ran off. That evening, while the boys worked at their lessons, Orin brought in a crate from the wagon. He set it on the kitchen table with a grunt. Stopped by the trading post. Fella had a barrel of dried raspberries. Said they came down with the freight from Montana. Aurelia looked up from the dough she was kneading. That so, might be enough for a pie or two. She dusted flour from her hands. Boone's going to think he conjured them. Orin leaned a hip against the counter, watching her. He's taken to you. I'm not trying to replace their mother, you're not. But they need someone who listens. She glanced at him. And you, I need someone who stays. The dough in her hand stilled. You think I will? I think you already are. She folded the corners of the cloth over the dough and set it aside to rise. You don't ask much about my life before. I figure you'll tell it when you're ready. I had a brother once, she said, voice low. He called me Willie because he couldn't say Aurelia when he was little. He was the only person who ever made me laugh when I didn't want to. Orin didn't speak, just nodded once, like he was tucking the name away. The next few days moved quiet and sure. Aurelia found herself learning the rhythm of the land, the sound of cattle stirring just before dawn, the way the sky turned slate blue before a storm. She walked the fence line with Bram when he asked for company, and sewed Boone's worn socks back together at night. Orin left early most mornings and returned late, always dusted in trail and sweat, but he never missed supper. One night, after the table was cleared and the boys had gone to sleep, Orin brought a bottle of corn whiskey from the pantry and poured them each a measure into mismatched mugs. I don't drink often, he said, but tonight feels like it calls for something. She took hers in both hands, the warmth of it seeping into her skin. Why tonight? He didn't answer right away. I signed the deed papers this afternoon. Bought the pasture that runs west to the ridge. She raised her eyebrows. That's a large stretch. Been saving for 5 years. Figured it was time. She took a sip, the liquor burning clean down her throat. You plan to run more cattle, eventually. And you'll need help. He looked at her then, eyes steady. I was hoping you'd stay, not as a guest, not as a helper, as a partner. Her breath caught. I buy the land because I believe this place can grow, he said. And I ask you because I believe we can too. She set her mug down, heart thudding. I came here thinking I'd be someone's wife, she said slowly, but you never treated me like I was meant to fill a place. You filled it anyway, he said, not because anyone expected it. Because you are who you are. She reached across the table, her fingers closing over his. Then yes, I'll stay, not because I have nowhere else, but because I've found where I belong. He turned her hand over and kissed her palm just once. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and warming soil. In that quiet house with its crooked walls and well-worn floors, something true had taken root. Not hurried, not forced, just steady as the rising sun. June settled with a breathless heat that clung to the land like a second skin. The days stretched long beneath a sharp blue sky, and the soil cracked beneath the weight of sun. Aurelia rose before it cleared the horizon, tying her apron with practiced hands as she moved through the house barefoot, the floorboards still cool from night. She didn't speak much in the mornings, and neither did Orin. They shared the quiet between them like a folded blanket, something that didn't need unwrapping to be understood. One Saturday, while the boys were off helping the neighboring rancher drive stray cattle back through the southern gate, Orin came in from the barn with a coil of rope slung over his shoulder and dust on his neck. "You ever been to the upper field?" he asked, setting the rope on a hook by the door. Aurelia wiped her hands on a cloth. "I haven't had reason," he nodded toward the porch. "You do now." She followed him outside and into the saddle, The gelding beneath her was steady-footed but spirited, and she kept her seat with ease. Orin led them along a narrow trail that wound between low hills and clusters of elm, his mare flicking her ears at the buzzing flies. "I used to come up here when I needed to think," he said over his shoulder. "My father called it God's elbow. Why? Because it juts out over the whole valley. Said it was the only place a man could look down and see the shape of what he built." They crested the rise near midday. The wind tugged at her skirt and lifted strands of her hair across her face. Below them, the land opened wide in all directions, grasslands rolling into distant peaks, fences like drawn lines, and the glint of the creek threading silver through the low ground. "I didn't know it looked like this from up here. I wanted you to see it first," Orin said. "Before I start fencing the new pasture." She watched a hawk wheel high above them. "It's hard to believe this all belongs to you," he shook his head. "It doesn't, not really, I just care for it while I can." She sat still a long moment, then turned to him. "What was your father like, hard man?" "Fair when he wanted to be. He didn't know what to do with a boy who cried when the colt broke its leg. Did you?" "Only once." They rode back slow, the sun pressed against their backs. At the house, Orin unsaddled the horses while Aurelia drew water from the well. He joined her by the back stoop, wiping his hands with a rag. "I've been thinking," he said, watching the chickens scratch near the post. "About, you came here to be a wife." "I came here to survive." He looked at her then, not with the soft weight of pity, but with the steadiness of someone who had come to understand her shape in the world. "I'm asking something different," he said. "Not because I need a cook or someone to mind the boys. I'm asking because I want to build a life beside you, with your name beside mine on the land papers, your say equal to mine." Aurelia didn't look away. "You're not offering charity. I'm offering my hand." She stepped closer, her voice low. "I never wanted to be saved, but I did want to be chosen. I'm choosing you," her breath caught. "Then I'll marry you, and not because I have nothing else, because I want to build something that holds." They stood there, no need for more words. The choice had already settled between them, not sudden, but earned like every good thing. That evening, Bram came in with dust up to his knees and a crumpled bonnet in his hand. "Boone said he found this by the fence line. Thought maybe it was yours." Aurelia took it, recognizing the faded ribbon. "It is. I must have dropped it on the ride." Bram leaned against the doorframe. "You and Pa look different today." "How so?" "Happy." She smiled, the kind that reached her eyes and stayed there. "Maybe we are." Later, as dusk cooled the walls and the boys drifted to sleep, Aurelia stepped out onto the porch. Orin joined her, setting a hand on the rail beside hers. "The preacher'll come out from town if I ask," he said. "Let him," she said. "But I won't wear white. You could wear sackcloth and I'd still call you the most beautiful thing I ever saw." She tilted her head. "You don't see the scar anymore. I see the woman who stayed when she could have run." She reached for his hand, lacing her fingers with his. "Then let's wake tomorrow with the sun and start the first day of the rest of it." He nodded once, and they stood like that, two people shaped by fire and loss, choosing to build something steady from what remained. The land around them breathed slow, and night settled not with loneliness, but with the hush of something finally at peace. The preacher came on a Thursday morning, his boots stained with road dust and his Bible wrapped in oilcloth to keep the wind from creasing its pages. He tied his mule at the post and tipped his hat to Aurelia before stepping inside. There was no ceremony, not in the way the East might have done it. No lace. No music. Just the quiet weight of promises made beneath a roof that had already seen months of shared labor, silence, and slow trust. After, the preacher took coffee on the porch, and when he left, Aurelia stood with Orin at the threshold. She didn't wear a ring, they hadn't the money for one, but the look in his eyes was weight enough. "Never thought I'd marry without asking my mother's blessing," she said, watching the dust rise behind the preacher's mule. Orin shifted beside her. "You think she'd be pleased? She'd ask if you were the kind of man to fix a fence before breakfast and still take time to teach a child how to spell." He chuckled. "What would you tell her?" "I'd say yes. And that he sees me as I am." He reached for her hand, calloused fingers closing around hers. "Then I hope she'd approve." They spent that evening mending the porch rail. The boys had knocked a slat loose wrestling over a wooden top. Orin drove the nails in and Aurelia steadied the board, the scent of pine sap clinging to her skin. Neither spoke of the morning. There was no need. The day had done what it came to do. By July, the new pasture was fenced, and Orin had taken in 3 strays from the neighboring homestead: a brindle cow with a torn ear, a steer with a limp, and a calf too small for market. Aurelia fed them early each morning, her skirts swishing through the dew-wet grass as she carried buckets from the barn. She had taken to humming when she worked, low and tuneless, but Orin had caught himself pausing in the doorway just to hear it. One late afternoon, as clouds gathered low and purple in the west, he found her in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hands deep in flour. "I saw the ledger," he said. "You've been balancing it." "I learned numbers from my father," she said. "He kept the town's books before the war." "I didn't ask you to." "No," she said, brushing flour from her cheek. "But it needed doing." He stepped closer, something unreadable in his expression. "You think I don't notice the things you do, but I do." She met his gaze. "Then say what you mean." "I'm proud of you." Her throat tightened. "I don't know what to make of that." "Then I'll keep saying it until you do." That storm broke before nightfall, and the house took it like a ship in water, creaking, trembling, but holding firm. Bram and Boone climbed into the loft with their blankets, and Orin stayed near the window, watching the lightning chase itself across the ridgeline. Aurelia sat at the table, darning socks by lamplight. She didn't look up when she spoke. "When the fire took our kitchen, I thought I'd never be seen again without shame. Folks in town stopped looking me full in the face." Orin turned from the window. "Then they didn't deserve you. I believed them for a long time." He sat across from her, his voice low. "How long did it take to stop?" She didn't answer right away. "I'm still learning." He reached across the table and placed his hand over hers. "Then let me learn with you." The oil lamp flickered once, then steadied. By the time August came, the fields had yellowed at the edges, and the creek ran slower. The boys spent their afternoons hauling water from the spring, their shirts sticking to their backs. One evening, Boone came in with a wasp sting on his forearm and tears he tried to blink away. Aurelia pressed a cold cloth against the swelling and whispered something only he heard. That night, he laid his head in her lap and fell asleep before the stars came out. Later, Orin found her by the hearth, mending a rip in his work coat. "You've made a place for yourself here," he said. She shook her head. "It was already here, I just stepped into it." He crouched beside her, fingers brushing the hem of his coat where she stitched. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." Aurelia looked at him, calm and sure. "You didn't turn away." He leaned in and kissed her, slow and certain, the fire casting gold across her face. Outside, the wind stirred the dry grass, and the house, worn, weathered, and deeply lived in, stood firm against the dark. Inside, love had taken root not with flourish, but with quiet, steady hands. September arrived with a gentler sun and wind that swept dry leaves beneath the porch steps. The land began to quiet itself, the way it always did before frost, when the days shortened and the nights settled early. The boys had started rising with less protest. Their limbs lengthened by summer's work, and Boone had taken to checking the chicken coop before breakfast without being asked. Aurelia stood in the lean-to beside the barn, sorting through a bolt of homespun she'd bartered off the traveling tinker for a skillet and a jar of pickled beets. She ran her fingers along the weave, already measuring curtains in her head for the front room's bare windows. Orin's voice came low behind her. "Thought I might cut back the elm near the well before it starts leaning worse." She didn't turn. "It's hollow at the trunk. I noticed. I could use another set of hands." She folded the cloth and tucked it into the crate. "Let me fetch my gloves." Outside, the tree loomed slightly off its root line, bark peeled back in a gray split. Orin steadied the ladder while she climbed, a saw looped at her hip. They worked in tandem, the kind of rhythm built from months of shared days, Aurelia calling out the angle, Orin bracing the limbs as they dropped one by one. By dusk, the elm stood trimmed and harmless. As they gathered the branches into a pile, she paused. "You've been looking at the ridge more often these past weeks." "I've been thinking about putting up a line of bee boxes. Neighbor's got a few, says they've helped his wildflower yield. You want to keep bees?" "Never tried. But I figure they know how to work." "Might suit this place." She nodded, brushing a curl behind her ear. "If we do it, I want to learn it with you, not just mind the honey." He looked at her then, a slow smile coming to his face. "You're not afraid of much." "I'm afraid of losing things I've only just gotten. Then we'll hold them tight." The first frost came the night after harvest. Bram had brought in the last of the squash, and Aurelia showed Boone how to twist the jars tight once the lid sealed from the boiling. That evening she sat with Orin at the table, the ledger open between them. "There's enough left after feed to buy another milk cow," she said, tracing the figures with her fingertip. He reached across the table and tapped the corner of the page. "I'd rather put it toward a loom." "You've been making do with scraps." She lifted her head. "You've been listening." "I always am." She closed the book gently. "Do you miss anything from before?" He leaned back, considering. "I miss knowing what each season would bring. Before you, it was just cattle and weather. And now it's more." That night, after the lamps were out and the house had gone still, she lay beside him, her hand resting against his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breath. "I never imagined I'd find this," she whispered. He turned toward her in the dark. "I didn't think it was meant for me." "You were wrong." "Glad of it." Winter settled in slow. Snow came early in November, and the boys practiced carving their names in the frost that formed on the window glass each morning. The woodpile shrank fast, and Orin made a habit of checking the barn roof before each storm. Inside, life moved in close quilts layered thick over the beds, boots lined by the hearth, and the scent of Aurelia's cinnamon bread lingering long after supper. One evening, as the snow fell in heavy silence, Bram pulled a folded paper from his school satchel and held it out. "It's a composition," he said. "Teacher asked us to write about who we admire." Aurelia unfolded it. The ink wavered in places, but the words were clear. She read quietly, then looked up. "You wrote about me," he nodded. "You came here and made everything better, even when you didn't have to." She reached for his hand, and he didn't shy from her touch. "That means more than you know." Later, when the fire had burned low and the boys were asleep, she sat on the floor beside Orin, their backs to the hearth. "They see me," she said softly. "Not just the part of me that's broken." He reached down, brushing his fingers through her hair. "They see what I see, a woman who rebuilt herself." She leaned her head against his knee. "I thought I'd always be trying to prove I was enough." "You don't have to prove anything, not here." She looked up at him. "What do you want this place to be in 10 years? He didn't answer right away. "Then, still ours, still full, and the boys, men by then. I want them to look back and know they were raised by strength and steadiness, by love they could count on." She rose and stepped into his arms, the fire casting soft shadows across the wall. "Then we'll give them that," she said. "Every day we can." They kissed, quiet and lasting, the kind of kiss that didn't ask for more than what was already understood. Years passed without fanfare. The bee boxes thrived by the ridge, and Aurelia's loom sang most mornings near the window. Boone grew into his father's shoulders, and Bram took to numbers without prompting. The house aged with them, its walls holding the sound of laughter and quiet evenings and all the small, shared things that built a life. And when Aurelia stood at the edge of the field one spring morning, her hands stained with dye and wind in her skirts, she turned to see Orin walking toward her, boots wet with dew, a tin mug in each hand. He passed one to her. "Still like your coffee black, always." They stood in silence, the creek glinting in the distance. "I never thought peace would feel like this," she said. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pulling her in. "It feels like home to me, and it was, always would be."